Hi, I'm Mr. Macmillan and welcome to part 2 of my introduction to the design argument. Let's look at probably the most famous version of the design argument. William Paley was an 18th century Christian apologist. This doesn't mean he went around apologising for being a Christian, but rather he wrote to defend the rationality of the Christian faith. In addition, he was a lecturer of philosophy at Cambridge University, as well as an Anglican vicar. In his book Natural Theology, Paley tells the story of walking across a heath, which is a fancy middle-class English word for a field. Should he stumble upon a rock and ask himself how it came to be there, because of its simplicity, he could conclude that it had lain there forever. This is in essence an acknowledgement that the nature of the stone can be explained by an appeal to nature. However, should he find a watch, even if he had never seen one before, he would conclude, because of its complexity, that it was in need of an intelligent explanation. How does Paley distinguish between simple things like rocks and complex things like watches? Paley uses a number of criteria which mark out complex objects as needing an intelligent explanation. They are: 1. It is made of specific materials. 2. It has several parts. 3. It works for a purpose or goal. 4. It produces a regular motion. And 5. If any of the parts had been different in any significant way, the object would not fit its purpose. The watch therefore shows every manifestation of design, and therefore requires a watchmaker. Now Paley argues by analogy, by comparing the watch with something like a human eye. He argues that the human eye is also complex, and in need of an intelligent explanation, since it fits all of his criteria of design as outlined before, e.g. many parts, having a purpose, etc., etc. Therefore, using the principle that like effects have like causes, we should conclude that since the human eye fulfills the same criteria, i.e. they share similar effects, then we should assume that they have a similar cause, i.e. it needs an intelligent explanation, an eye maker. Paley says, every manifestation of design which existed in the watch exists in the works of nature, and therefore the marks of design are too strong to be got over. Design must have had a designer. That designer must have been a person. That person is God. Due to the impact of Darwin's theory of evolution, which some thinkers believe undermines attempts to identify design from the field of biology, modern versions of the design argument tend to focus on the field of physics. One such example is the anthropic design argument. The word anthropic means related to humankind. This argument is most associated with Fred Robert Tennant, who shared a lot in common with William Paley. He too was a Cambridge graduate, an ordained minister, and an apologist. A physicist by the name of Dyson, not the inventor of the bagless vacuum cleaner, wrote, "As we look out into the universe and identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked together to our benefit, it almost seems as if the universe must in some sense have known that we were coming." What does Dyson mean by accidents of physics? He is referring to what Tennant called the anthropic principle, an idea that is sometimes linked to cosmic fine-tuning. Cosmic fine-tuning is based on the growing number of observations by physicists that seem to demonstrate that the existence of human life is extremely improbable, since our existence is based on a very precise set of finely tuned physical constants. Stephen Hawking, the only person in this video who has been on The Simpsons, wrote, "The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers or constants seems to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life." Scientist Paul Davies, who wrote the Goldilocks Enigma, gives an example of a physical constant that has to be just right for us to be here. If the strength of the initial event that was the Big Bang had been stronger or weaker by just 1 part in 10 to the power 60, then the conclusion would be an uninhabitable universe or no universe at all. This is just one example, but there are many more. Schwarzenberg wrote, "If the universe were in fact different in any significant way from the way it is, we wouldn't be here to wonder why it is the way it is." We can represent this mathematically just using the example given above. If the probability of the Big Bang being the way it was, by chance, is 0.000 with 60 zeros followed by a 1, then the probability of it happening not by chance is 1 minus this number, which makes 0.999 with 60 nines. If design is the only alternative to chance, then this means that the probability of this happening by design is 99.999 with quite a few more 9% certain. To paraphrase Goldilocks, the universe is just right for life. One of the biggest critics of the analogical teleological argument was the Scottish philosopher David Hume, here seen wearing typical Scottish daily wear. As a child prodigy, Hume went to university at the age of 12. Despite writing before Paley, most of his criticisms have at times been applied to Paley's argument. I have summarised his criticisms into 4 parts. Firstly, Hume challenged the underlying assumption of Paley's argument, the idea that like effects have like causes. Hume said this was an unproven claim on which it was not possible to base an argument. Like effects do not always have like causes. Secondly, Hume said that a comparison between things in nature and man-made machines was an unsound analogy. The world was not like a machine, and perhaps all things in nature should be treated in the same way as the rock in Paley's original analogy. Where Paley compared the eye to a watch, Hume argued we would be better to compare it to a rock, because given enough time, things like eyes and solar systems could come about in the same way a rock comes about after a million years of erosion, etc. Thirdly, Hume argued that we have no experience of how worlds are created, and therefore can make no certain judgments about how our world was made. We know that a watch needs a watchmaker because we have lots of experience with machines and things like watches. However, we have nothing to compare our universe with, and therefore have no point of reference for judging whether it is designed or not. Finally, Hume claimed that even if the analogical argument did point to the need for a designer, it does not prove that this is the God of classical theism. In fact, far from this, it leads to a very limited human view of God, what we might call an anthropomorphic view of God. Perhaps this universe was the work of an infant God, perhaps the work of a frail or incompetent God, or an evil God, or maybe even many gods working in collaboration. In addition to Hume's criticisms, a number of other criticisms have been made of the design argument. Firstly, Darwinian evolution provides a mechanism by which simple organisms, given enough time, can evolve into complex creatures with no obvious need for an intelligent explanation. This appears to undermine Paley's concept of goal-orientated design, since evolution is the explanation for complexity in biology. Evolutionary biologist and atheist Richard Dawkins, yes, him again, believes evolution should lead us all to atheism, since evolution replaces God as the watchmaker, albeit a blind watchmaker. Secondly, A.J. Ayer said that our limited experience meant we just can't know what the difference between a designed universe and an undesigned universe would be. It would be like trying to work out whether a Rolex watch was real or fake, having never seen a watch in your life before. We just don't have the possibility of comparison. As Kant observed, as human beings we like to see order, even when it doesn't exist. We can't trust our perception that the order in the universe is genuine. Thirdly, the Greek philosopher Epicurus, yes, another Greek philosopher, argued that given enough time, order can come from chaos. Furthermore, once order is established, it tends to perpetuate itself. So although the universe may appear ordered now, and therefore seem to require a designer, it may not always have been this way, since it may have started out in chaos, which wouldn't seem to imply a designer. This idea is sometimes called the Epicurean hypothesis. Good luck trying to spell that in the exam. The final 2 criticisms apply mainly to the anthropic argument. Fourthly, although Tennant and others believe the anthropic principle creates a strong case for the existence of a designing intelligence, there are some who believe it does exactly the opposite. This is sometimes called the weak anthropic principle. This says that we shouldn't use as evidence to support an argument something which, if it were different, we wouldn't be here to make such an argument, since this would lead to circular reasoning. It would be like a puddle being amazed that the hole in the ground it inhabits seems perfectly fitted for it, when in fact it couldn't be any other way. Perhaps it is the human race that is finely tuned for the universe, not the other way round. Finally, in recent years cosmologists have proposed the multiverse theory, which suggests that there are multiple, even infinite universes. If this is true, although it is unverifiable, the huge improbabilities suggested by the anthropic argument would no longer be a problem, since with an endless combination of universes, it is certain that at least one would contain the right conditions for life. Therefore, life is inevitable. That's the end of part 2 of my introduction to the design argument. If you have found this useful, then please feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also follow me on Twitter, like my Facebook page, or download audio versions of these videos from podbean.com. Thanks for watching.